Brand nerds, stop. You've never heard me say that to open this podcast. Not one time. But I'm saying stop doing whatever you're doing right now and listen to our next guest. Not for me, do it for you. Some of you may be wondering, okay, wow, these dudes have listeners in 100 countries. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. They've done approaching 200 podcasts. And this Yahoo I'm listening to right now opens the podcast the same way and has done it that way for years. Why would he now choose to open a podcast of Brands, Beats, and Bytes with the word stop? Good question, Brand Nerds. That's a very good question. I don't know if any of you all listening have been in a situation where you met someone you did not know. You never met this person before. Yet they had a profound impact on your career. It's weird, Brand Nerds. It's weird. That's our next guest. And I am going to tell you why that is the case. As I was coming up as a young pup in the brand management game, I used to read something. Larry will go into further detail here in a moment. And there were three things that I took away from it regularly. And I'm going to put them, you know I like threes, Brand Nerds, in threes. D, C, P. The D. It helped me make better decisions. That was important to me. Smarter decisions. C. The information was C-suite level insights. P. Prescient. When I would read this stuff, I actually wondered, does this dude have a crystal ball? Like, how is it possible to not only reveal information and insights that are relevant today, but that point forward, in some cases, years, to what might be germane then to help me make better decisions, because this prescience that this dude has is seemingly like without fail. Brand Nerds, get ready for a treat. We have an icon in the building. Larry, please do the honors and the justice of who we have been blessed with in the Brands, Beats, and Bytes sphere.
D, what a great setup. Brand Nerds, you will hear a lot more, as you know, in the intro, but we have Jack Meyers in the house today. Welcome, Jack.
Number one, I hope all your audience is not just disappointed now that you've told them who is actually. I was waiting. Who's the other guest here? Oh my God! What a DC. Where have you been my whole career? I would have had you open for me every time. First of all, I love your DCP, decision, C-suite level insights, and prescient, because I am going to steal that and use that to describe my goal, my objective, and what I hope I can share here today. Thank you for that.
It's yours, brother. Great. But we just getting started. It's yours. Larry's got even more.
We're just getting started. So Jack, DC did the great setup, but now we have to let our brand nerds in to really understand who we have in the virtual building today. Okay, brand nerds. We have had the great fortune of having many accomplished people on the podcast before, but no one more so than Jack. Jack is a master storyteller, media ecologist, and generational visionary whose work explores the evolving relationships between technology, culture, communications, and human consciousness. Let's walk you through his amazing background. For college, Jack attends the prestigious Syracuse University Newhouse School, where he earns his undergrad degree in radio and television, and while in school, works as a reporter for the Daily Orange and as the promotions director for WAER, the Syracuse University radio station. After graduation, Jack soon finds himself working at New York radio station WPLJ. It is hard to describe the popularity of WPLJ back in the 1970s, but Jack was right there on the team, eventually becoming sales manager for the station. While still working at WPLJ, Jack goes back to school at NYU's Steinhardt School of Culture, Education, and Development, where he earns his master's in education for communication and media studies. Armed with this new degree, he goes to work at CBS as director of marketing, where he manages a team of marketing professionals who work with new advertisers, helping them optimize their media strategies, creative executions, and new technology orientation to ultimately maximize their ROI with the CBS ad buy. After successfully doing this for 7 years, this is what DC was alluding to, brand nerds, Jack starts the Meyers Report. Since 1984 and through today, the Meyers Report has become a trusted intelligence platform for leaders navigating media, technology, and culture. It is truly a go-to place, a go-to platform for industry insiders to be on the front foot in helping readers anticipate transformation and leading with clarity, empathy, and purpose. With this foundation, many major companies, including General Motors, Microsoft, Comcast, NBC Universal, Aegis Karat, Campbell Soup, and the Walt Disney Company, just to name a few, seek out Jack for his help in shaping strategies and inspiring a new generation of purpose-driven leaders. All great stuff. Indeed, if we ended there, that would be awesome. But brand nerds, there is a whole lot more.
But wait, there's more.
That's right, exactly. How about writing books? Jack is an accomplished author, including 2 bestsellers, one being The Tao of Leadership, Harmonizing Technological Innovation and Human Creativity in the AI Era. The next one, The Future of Men, Masculinity in the 21st Century. And he's also written Hooked Up, a new generation's surprising take on sex, politics, and saving the world, the first in-depth study of Gen Z. How about TED Talks? Since Jack is always ahead of the curve, his renowned TED Women Talk on the future of men has generated more than 1 million YouTube views. How about giving back? Jack is founder and chairman of MediaVillage Education Foundation, the advertising and media industry's premier knowledge exchange platform. He is also on the board for great organizations which include IRTS, the John Reisenbach Foundation, TD Foundation. She runs it, and he's also founder for advancingdiversity.org. How about education? You think all of this would keep him busy enough, but he is currently a senior lecturer on new media theory at the University of Arizona School of Information Sciences. And how about podcasts? Something DC and I are really looking forward to is the podcast Jack is co-hosting with our great friend Tim Spengler called Lead Human, which debuts any day now in January of 2026. With all of this great stuff, Jack has earned many honors over the years, including the Excellence in Education Award from the Global Forum on Education and Learning, the George Foster Peabody Award, Academy and Emmy Award nominations for documentary filmmaking, the Crystal Heart Award for the Heartland Film Festival, a top 10 most admired leader in tech by Pinnacle Tech Insights. Jack and his wife Rhonda live in Tucson and Santa Barbara and enjoyed time with their 5 children and 6 grandchildren. We're really looking forward to this one, brand nerds. Welcome to Brands, Beats, and Bytes, Jack Meyers.
I am friggin' impressed with myself. Holy shit! What an amazing life I've had. You know, I actually have no idea where you got most of that stuff, but geez, I don't know how to live up to all that. Thank you. It's really interesting to hear it all back, especially the early WPLJ, you know, at the cusp of FM radio emerging out of, AM at CBS when cable was just emerging. In fact, I left CBS. I thought I'd be there my whole career. I mean, all I ever wanted was to go to work at CBS. And
the Tiffany Network, brand nerds, that's what it was known as.
Tiffany Network. I mean, that was the place to be, and I thought it would be a career there. But one of my jobs was to look at new technology and recommend. And I was a big fan, big advocate, evangelist internally and externally for cable, when cable was not well loved by the broadcast industry. And my
Yeah.
boss at the time suggested that if I love cable so effing much, maybe I should go to work for effing cable,
Mhm.
which I did, and then launched the Meyers report shortly after that.
That's awesome. I love that backdrop.
Uh, Jack, what you received today is what we call your flowers. Yeah. We often don't get our flowers, Jack, until we are in the ground. And then several folks extol our virtues. It doesn't typically happen like this. Or if you're keynoting something and someone introduces you, they give like a 144 character introduction of you before you speak. On Brands, Beats, and Bytes, we want to make sure that the peoples know who is in the building, and we also want to make certain that the person knows how highly we think of them.
Well,
Yeah. It's all
thank
you.
you, especially that both of you have such extraordinary backgrounds yourselves and history and DC. It's good to know that I had some relevance and meaning to you earlier in your career, but you did age me that way also. So,
That's true. That's true. All right, Jack, we are going to the next section. It's called Get Comfy. Jack Myers, I love origin stories. So whenever I see something that I find that is great, exceptional, I am not curious about what I'm seeing. I'm curious about why I'm seeing what I'm seeing and what were the origins of what I'm seeing. Love that. This is why Marvel movies or DC comic movies, these are the biggest movies in the world, by the way. They all have an origin story. All of them do. And in our world, also some of the best marketing has origin stories. Like I was watching a piece of content the other day, and it was from Mercedes Benz, Jack, and it showed that it was Santa Claus and Mama Claus. They're together, and Santa Claus is taken ill. He can't go out. So Mama Claus says, "I will do it. I'm gonna do the sleigh tonight." And then they cut to Mama Claus is now outside. It is snowing, and you see 6 or 8 white Benzes cutting through, dashing, if you will, through the snow. She is in a red Benz, very smart, sexy looking red Benz that is in the rear, pretending to be the sleigh, while the white Benzes are pretending to be the reindeer. And while she is doing this, a song comes on from the rapper and now multi-hyphenate talent Eve. And the song is Who's That Girl? So they start playing this classic hip hop song of Who's That Girl as Mama Claus is about to go and deliver these gifts around the world. Jack.
I love that
Yeah,
story.
Jack, so do I. Jack, decades ago, had someone said to me when I was a young pup on Sprite, repositioning that brand from I like the Sprite and you to Obey Your Thirst, and Obey Your Thirst as a strategic platform we thought was best manifested through hip hop. Hip hop. We were the first major brand in the world to really dive into the culture. In fact, it started before I got there. Credit where credit is due. Tom Burrell and the marketers at Coca-Cola had Curtis blow in a Sprite ad in 1984. If
Wow.
someone had
Wow.
said in 2025, there's going to be this commercial from Mercedes-Benz, one of the top brands in the world, with Santa Claus and Mama Claus, with the background music being Who's That Girl from rapper Eve. Her crew
Eve.
was called Rough
Wow.
Riders. Jack, I would have thought you were out of your fucking mind. All right. But that's the origin story. So we know where that comes from. Now I'm coming to you. I mentioned up front at the opening, the reason why I read the Meyers report is because of the DCP, D decision, C-suite insights, and then P prescience. I didn't know you had this connection to the NYU Steinhardt School of Culture.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But I know this book that you've written, The Future of Man, Masculinity in the 21st Century. So I do know that. That was launched in 2016. I have really been into Professor Prof. G. You know who I'm talking about, Jack. Professor Prof. G at NYU now, who talks about, he is considered the foremost person in talking about the state of young men. This is in 2025. He's considered that. And I got curious, where did that come from? What's the origin of his book and his thinking and platform about young men? And the origin story, Jack Meyers, is you. It's you. And as I began to think about The Future of Men, this book that you wrote back in 2026, I like threes, Jack. I came away with three things that you focused on. One was education. What's happening with the education of young men relative to young women? Two, career. How have careers changed for young men and young women? And then finally, relationships. How has the difference in what has occurred over the decades impacted relationships as a result of the education difference and career difference? That all leads me to a question, Mr. Jack Meyers. You're the OG of this whole what's happening with our young men in our culture, in our politics, in our society. What moved you to identify that, and what do you most want people to take away from that?
It's really interesting that you focus on that first. We'll come back to Professor G later in the conversation, maybe when we drill down into, maybe some of the things that that are, kind of pet peeves right now, or issues for me right now. But it's a huge topic. So it really evolved. Before I wrote the Future of Men, I had written a book called The Relationship Age: Reconnecting with Customers that initially kind of identified the internet as a major technological shift, and always looking, because I came out of FM radio and cable TV, and I really always was fascinated by technological change. And in looking at technological change, it led me to also look at how are generations impacted by technology? How does it impact? I know how I was impacted by television, how cultures were impacted by rock and roll. You talk about hip hop, you talk about rap. I'm watching the Sean Combs documentary, and learning a lot about how that culture and the impact. So technology changes impact, music changes generations. So as I was looking at the generational shifts, I was really recognizing that for my own career, I felt I saw this new generation coming into the advertising and media business. And I realized there was no foundation for education, which you mentioned is one your first of the three. Education, careers, relationships. It's exactly what I was looking at. How do we educate this new generation that's coming into our business as it's growing, expanding exponentially? And how do we positively impact on their careers? And I thought, well, let's create relationships. So you hit on the three key things. And in building out relationships, I realized, I looked at it and I said, wait a second, when I went into the agencies and I was walking around, I was realizing it's all women.
Yeah.
Now,
Right.
I grew up in an industry that was all men, and now
Yeah.
wait a second, this is all young women, and what are we doing to educate them? What are we doing to help them build their careers and relationships? So I started 2011. I started an organization called Women in Media Mentoring Association Foundation, and I brought women together as dual mentoring, that the more senior ones have as much to learn as the younger ones. So it
Yep.
was
Yep.
dual
Yep.
mentoring. And it grew from bringing together 40 women, 20 and 20 young, early stage, and 20 senior, to all of a sudden, a year later, we had 1,000 women at an event that we hosted at Horizon Media that Bill Konigsberg and I brought together. Bill and I were the only men in the room. And,
Wow.
and, and what I also realized is that there were like 200 men, more senior people, and about 800 younger women, and it was just out of hand. And as I realized that, and as that started to evolve, and I said, we really need to wonder what's going on with the men.
Right.
Yeah.
What's going on? And I just started researching it. So kind of 2013, 2014, I was researching. I realized 60% of not only are 60% of college graduates men, but 60% of high school graduates are men.
Ah.
And
Okay.
the percentages even down into the grade school level were increasingly, young men were dropping out early from all forms of school.
Wait, Jack, hold on a second. Did you say 60% of graduates are men or women?
We're women. I'm sorry.
Women.
Okay.
60%
Yeah.
women.
Yep.
I'm
Right.
sorry. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
60% of college students are female, 60% of high school students are female.
Right.
And then I started looking at the
But wait,
postgraduate.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but stop there. Think about that, brand nerds, for a second. 6 out of 10 college graduates are female. Like 6 out of 10 college folks who are getting college educations are female. That's a big difference, the 60-40 difference. And so think of the manifestation to you, and that's where you're seeing of how that plays itself out in the coming years. So anyway, I think it's that important to stop to whoa, that's
and
a
that was
big deal.
compounded by the diversity. Was also far more people of color coming into the business and there was no institutional focus on it. So I started working on that. We created the MediaVillage at that point. But more importantly, to your point, DC, is I really started asking the question of what's going on with the men, and I started researching that, and that led to the book, the Future of Men, Masculinity in the 21st Century, that was really focused on we've got a problem, we've got a masculinity issue. I wrote it in 2014, 2015, published early February 2016, when we thought that Hillary Clinton was going to be our next president.
Yeah.
But I also saw the emergence of Donald Trump in that process, and I saw what is the beginning of what Professor G has focused on today, and the reality that no one was really paying attention to this emerging problem. So let's call attention to it and let's identify solutions. So my book, The Future Men, my TED Talk, offered really 7 solutions. Here's what we can do. Number 1, we need to focus in on how we're educating them. We need to introduce gaming. We need to change the nature of how we reach, how we talk to, how we communicate internally. We need to change the media. We need to change, and DC's core, and Larry, to your work as in branding. How do you get the man as the fool, the idiot, the bumbling guy who can't pick his own medicine, can't decide how to fix anything? The only man nuclear family that was functional in television in 2015 was The Simpsons. Was The Simpsons and Bob's Burgers. So we didn't have a functional society, a functional male role model in media at that time. And you look back in history, and you can look at the points at which that shifted and we weren't seeing the shift back. So I wrote about it, and that became a best-selling book, but didn't have an impact. Unfortunately, I really, at my TED Women talk, I asked women to really step up, pay attention to what's going on in masculinity, and start bringing men into the circle, into the conversation, to accept masculine vulnerability, to get rid of uh, the man as the control, as the power. And of course, then we had the Me Too movement. The book predicted the Me Too movement if we didn't address the problems, and we to this day have not addressed the problems. And that's where Pref G steps in and has his voice. And I'd love to be able to talk about that more a little. Maybe we'll get to it later.
Okay.
Thanks for bringing that up, and I'm sorry for such a long answer. Maybe you'll edit me down a little.
That's what podcasts are for, Jack.
No.
Don't worry about it.
You're all good, brother.
Yeah.
Larry, I've got a couple things. You got anything on this?
Please go.
The first one is this, brand nerds. I want to be very clear about Jack's intention with the book and what he just said, because some could take away from this, men, they got everything. They rule the world. Who needs to take care of them? Jack is not saying this is a zero-sum game.
Right.
He's not saying, these men are in trouble, therefore they're losing their power and all of that. What he is saying, I think, is if we take care of everyone in our society, everyone, if we notice where there is pain, and by the way, brand nerds, we are in the emotional connection business. People buy, vote, and do things for emotional reasons and justify it with logic. That's the fact. That's the fact. If we don't address some of these emotional gaps, our society is not as good, functioning as well as it could. So I want to clear that up right away about what Jack Meyers' book is about, his speeches, and what he's saying now. Then I want to go to something else. Go ahead, Jack.
There are still huge gender gaps at the senior management level, at C-suite levels, across the corporate world and boards. There's still a lot of gender.
Absolutely.
And the research all shows that when there's more gender and ethnic representation, that corporations do better. So, and in marketing, we know that's true, and that's true. But the women's movement, I think we also have to acknowledge how successful the women's movement, STEM movement, has been and continues to be. And look, my wife heads an organization called Connected Women Leaders that has launched Project Dandelion, focusing on women-led solutions for climate. When you go around the world and you see where the grassroots solutions are, 80% are being led and managed by and implemented by women. So we know that women-led organizations, women-led initiatives and programs are very powerful at getting things done. And we need to actively be working on solutions for the masculinity challenge today. They go deeper than we were certainly deeper than we were recognizing. And I don't, to your point, DC, I don't want to diminish the realities of we have issues across a lot of different realities in our world today that need attention. When we come together, when we operate as one purposeful humanity, we do better. And that's where we win. So, I appreciate you saying that. I'm frustrated. I'm depressed a little by some of the realities we're confronting in the world today, which maybe we'll get into a bit. But I don't think we can certainly underplay the issues that Professor G and again, I got some issues there, but we'll talk about that maybe.
We'll get to that later, perhaps, Jack.
Maybe.
Excellent.
We'll see. We'll see where we go.
I'll close it with this. It can be both and, not either or. This is coming from a brother. I'm a black man who has been black my entire life, and I'm gonna go to the grave black. A proud black man. I know what it's like to deal with things that are challenging. I know what it's like to walk into a room and not see another person of color. I know what that's like. I know what it's like being in a room full of MBAs from the best business schools in the world. And I did undergrad at Alabama A&M, go Bulldogs, and I did grad school at Clark Atlanta University. These are two HBCUs. So I understand what that's like and the challenges that are there. I also know what it's like to have someone put a hand out to me and say, listen, young man, these are the things you need to know about the environment that you are navigating. I know that as well. And I don't become, at the time, you'll remember this, Jack, in our day, Brand Week magazine was like a marketer of the year. At that time, it was a big deal. Now all these different platforms have marketer of the year. But at that time, Jeff Bezos, Steve Jobs, the Google boys, Larry Page, they were acknowledged as marketers of the year. Without someone looking out for me and understanding some of the pain that I was dealing with, just like men are now, young men are now, I'm never, and I'm not saying this to try to big up myself, I'm not the second youngest at that time ever marketer of the year. Not 40 under 40, not top black marketer of the year, none of that. Top marketer of the year, all of the awards that they had given at that time, second youngest ever. That never happens to me unless someone does for me what you're trying to do for men. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox. We are going now to the next question. Next question is called 5 Questions.
I just want to say that I want to acknowledge I'm a privileged white man who's had a reasonably privileged life, and really respect and pay tribute to what you've accomplished.
Thank you. Thank you, Jack.
Yeah, it's amazing. And Jack, I have to say this before he goes on. The youngest Brand Week Marketer of the Year was August Bush IV. So need we say more?
If I'm not going to be the youngest, I guess I could be second to that guy.
Born on third base. Go ahead, D.
Here we go. Next segment, 5 questions. Larry and I go back and forth until we arrive at 5. I have the honor of starting this. What was the first branding experience you had that just lit your soul afire, captivated your imagination? You couldn't get enough of it. You thought that when you were engaging with this brand, Jack, you thought, I've been thinking about this or doing this or wearing this or whatever it is or listening to this for 15 minutes. And you're like, God damn, 3 hours has passed? How could 3 hours have passed? A bit like a first love. What was this for you, Jack?
Oh, I got an answer for you, but because you're talking about brands and because you're such an incredible branding expert, I'm watching a show called Landman on Paramount Plus.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just watching the most recent episodes, and Sam Elliott is a new character. He plays the lead character is Billy Bob Thornton. Sam Elliott's his grandfather, and his grandfather is in a home, and he's asked, what do you remember? And he says, it's only one thing I remember. That's Brill cream.
Okay.
And I turned to my wife and I said, Brill cream, a little dabble do ya. Brill cream, use it if you dare. Brill cream, the girls will all pursue you. They'll love to run their fingers through your hair. And, so I couldn't resist sharing that with you. But my first brand love was Dumont Television.
Wow.
Dumont.
Okay.
Now, Dumont invented the cathode ray tube, which was in the back of all those early 1950s television. They created the Dumont Network, which was the first TV network. They created daytime television, putting program onto that TV. They built the first TV in 1931 and introduced the first post-war mass-produced TV in 1946. And it was the first TV that my dad was willing to bring into my house. He bought a used one for $10.
Wow.
And it was a big TV with a little screen. And I actually got a poster up on my wall for Dumont. I was a little older. A lot of my neighbors had TV, and it's like the college kid that you never let have a cocktail or a drink, and he gets to college and drinks a quart of Jack Daniels and gets sick. That was me with TV. I could not get enough of it. It was on for, as soon as I got home from school, it was on. If my parents would let me, it'd be, when they were out late at night, I'd lie there, I'd fall asleep to the TV. I'd watch late night TV. Steve, even as a kid, I was watching Steve Allen on late night TV. I watched everything. I grew up in Utica, New York.
Hold on, Jack. Did you ever watch the national anthem that would come on?
Always with the jet planes going over, of course, and I'd watch it'd go to the color, the black and white at the time, but it'd go to just a symbol, kind of a and I'd leave that on. So yeah, I did. And I grew up in Utica, New York. We only had one television network station, channel 13, WKTV. It was a dual affiliate of NBC and ABC, and at one point NBC and ABC was an offshoot, a sister company of NBC. NBC owned, and the government forced them to divest. They were called the Red Network, the Blue Network. Wow. And so we'd watch, I didn't get CBS, which was horrible. My dad wouldn't put an antenna on, but that Dumont TV was just that it was emblazoned. It was my first awareness that there was something of a brand, that there was something. I didn't watch TV. I watched my Dumont. So it was it was the first love I had, and it's carried me throughout my whole life. That passion about the technology, that passion for television.
Oh, I love this, D.
Wow.
You talk about an origin story. DC, what you were talking about before.
That's an origin story.
Right? Jack, I mean, that's your origin. And I knew about the Dumont network. I did not know that, I guess maybe I did in the recesses of my mind, that Dumont also manufactured televisions, but it's incredible that by a certain, whether they got bought out or sold, a lot of times the pioneers don't end up reaping the rewards, shall we say, right?
They were RCA before RCA. They were, they had it all. They had they had the technology, they had the content. They just couldn't build it, couldn't grow it the way RCA did.
Which an RCA, brand nerds, just so you know, was NBC, the connection, and it was RCA stood for the Radio Corporation of America, if I'm not mistaken, right, Jack?
That was good. That's exactly right.
Yeah. Oh, I love this story.
CBS, Columbia Broadcast System. Yeah.
Right. D, any thoughts before we get to the next question?
I don't. Let's go to the next question. That was great.
That was great, Jack. Okay, so who has had or is having the most influence on your career?
I should, by the way, give some credit to the New York Yankees for being the other brand that I grew up with, and that's an origin story. That's it's a whole other story around that. But I do want to give some credit to the Yankees for being such a dominant brand in my life. Go ask me the second question again.
That's cool. We totally read you on the Yankees. So second question is, who has had or is having the most influence on your career?
Okay, so I got to go in two different directions there. The individual who's had the most influence on my career is Dr. Neil Postman. Neil Postman is my professor at NYU. He was the founder of the Media Ecology program at NYU, which grew out of his being mentored by Marshall McLuhan.
Wow.
The medium is the massage. The medium is the message, of course. And Neil Postman wrote a number of books, the most prominent of which is Amusing Ourselves to Death, Public Discourse in the Age of Show Business, which anticipated Donald Trump and how media has become so prominent. Media ecology has been the most formative part of my career. I've called myself a media ecologist. You look at my business card, when I had one, it said media ecologist. And you
We read it in
mentioned
your
media
intro.
ecologist, DC, in the introduction, Larry. So,
Yes.
So Neil, I remember I was at ABC. You mentioned I was at ABC Radio, and they paid for me to get a master's degree. I thought I'd take advantage of it. I found this thing called media ecology at NYU. I didn't know what it was, but it was media. So I signed up, and I walked into course. I was high at the time, first class in, master's program. I figure I'll, tune up a little before I go in.
Right.
I walk into class. I learned more in the first 10 minutes of that class than I had learned in 4 years of college.
Wow.
I still have my notebook from that Media Ecology 101. And
Wow.
today I just wrote, and it was just in the last month, published a textbook called Media Ecology for the 21st Century. So it stayed with me. It's been incredibly formative. But in terms of individual, like more traditional influences in my career, I've got to go back to CBS and the people who were responsible for giving me an opportunity to introduce ideas for business development, to say, let's go outside of the world we're currently operating in, our veils model. Let's go out and see where categories. And at that time, I focused on newspaper advertisers who were the local retailers, heavily the fashion retailers. We were getting 0% of their budgets, and they were spending millions in newspapers. I said, we've got to be able. And
Right.
everyone, the answer came back, hey, they've tried it before. They've always failed. Well, to your point, DC, they were doing brand advertising. And they were failing in television with brand advertising. Why? Because they were in the business of driving next day sales. So I figure, and they were using vendor dollars. They were using the manufacturer dollars. So I put together a whole program that I pitched to a guy named Mike DeGennaro. He was the director of sales at Channel 2 in New York. I had been there 6 months. I'd come from PLJ, where I was retail sales manager, and I was the lowest salesperson in the totem pole. 6 months selling retail sales at a company where I was at the furthest office away from the managers.
Right.
And my boss, who was retail sales manager, local sales manager, who had kind of brought me in and said, let's develop some retail business, got promotion. And all of a sudden his job's open, and I look at the three guys who are pitching the job, and one of them's going to get the job, and I'm realizing I'm going to be out of work. None of these guys are going to continue to support me. So I went to Mike DeGennaro, the director of sales. I said, I just got to ask you about my future. I'm like, I see who you're about to hire, and here's what I'm doing, and here's what I believe in, and should I be looking for a job? And I said, I know it's too soon for me to pitch the job. He said, why is it too soon for you to pitch the job? I pitched the job. I got the job. Not only did he give me the job, he had to go to his boss, who was the general manager of Channel 2, a guy named Tom Leahy. And Tom had to agree to hire me, sight unseen, without having met me. And I remember I hadn't gotten the job yet, and I was at an event, and Tom was there, and I introduced myself, and he said, "Oh, you're Jack Meyers." And he talked to me for a bit, and I said, "I think I'm going to get this. I think I'm going to get this job."
So help me out, Jack. What was the actual job?
It was retail sales manager for Channel 2.
Got it.
It was
Okay.
local sales manager
Got it.
for Channel 2. Local sales manager was typically the stepping stone for general sales manager,
Got it.
which is a stepping stone for director of sales, which is a
Mhm.
stepping stone for, who knows
Right.
what. So, and it was, and I then had a long 7-year career of doing business development, and having 4 promotions in 7 years. Mike DeGennaro, Tom Leahy, Gail Trell, a guy named Dave Poltrack, who was around for, 50 years at CBS
I
after that.
remember him.
It was a culture that was willing to take a chance, that was willing to take risks, that was willing to step out of the traditional box that you're in as a sales organization. And it was the catapult for my career. Nothing would have happened in my career had I not been given that opportunity.
Love that origin. More origin story. This is great. D, anything to add before we go to the next question?
I do have one thing for the brand nerds. What you heard Jack say is, as he's talking with someone who was giving him advice, that person asked a critical question. Why don't you pitch for it? Why don't you pitch for it? To which young Jack says, oh yeah, I'm gonna go pitch for this. Had you not been asked that question, maybe you would have, maybe not sure, but you were asked the question, and it was a bit of a nudging. Brand nerds, as you sit here now listening to this podcast, and you are thinking about your career and maybe your next step, whatever it is, why don't you pitch for it?
Saying that reminded me there's one more person I have to add, and his name's Larry Divney. A lot of people in your audience may remember Larry. The last job he had in his career was he was president of MTV, Viacom ad sales. He headed up Comedy Central for a while. But Larry was at WPLJ, and he was my boss. I was a salesman there. And I had to your point about pitching, he had the job of local sales manager open at WPLJ, and I pitched that. And my pitch was, let's focus in, let's make it retail we're going after, as opposed to the legacy advertisers. So if Larry hadn't given me that job, I never would have gotten the job to begin with at Channel 2. So it's a hierarchy and Larry remained one of my best friends, continues to be one of my best friends today, and it's had a long influence on my career. So I want to give him a shout out there too.
Shout out Larry Disney.
Yes.
All right, next question, Jack. Your virtues have been extolled in depth. This next question has not a thing to do with any of these wonderful virtues that you have, not a one. This question begs you to focus on the biggest F up. The one that's on you, Jack, not, oh, the market changed and my boss did this and they took the budget. No. You, Jack Meyers, thought one thing was going to happen. You did it. You led a group to do it. Someone gave you money, client, whatever, and it bombed. What was that for you? And more importantly, what'd you learn from it?
I could name a half dozen things that I've bombed at that were pretty big and pretty meaningful. One thing I'm sure we've both learned, that when we're being interviewed and someone asks you that question or the similar question, you always want to find something that can be turned around as a positive. You don't want it. So the reality is that if I've had a court that has led to all of my fuck ups, that's the initial fuck up, is that I've believed too much in myself. I believed too much in my own ideas. I believed too much that I was right about things. And most of those things, it turned out I was right, but it took anywhere from 5 to 20, maybe even 40 years before there was evidence that, if companies and clients and people had followed the Future of Men being an example of that, being right, being too early, and believing too much in myself and not taking in a good partner who could manage the business realities while I managed the idea, the marketing, the belief. I've been a really good salesperson for my ideas. So I convinced people to go with me long enough. But when I asked them then to pay for it, pay enough to be profitable, to be financially successful, I did not get over that leap. So I would say the single biggest disappointment among several along those lines was a company called Television Production Partners, founded with my with David Houle, who was in the business at the time in the early 90s, mid 90s, and has become one of the really leading global futurists today. He and I recognized that the Hollywood system, that the media industry, the television network programming industry, as cable was, being introduced, and as we looked at the opportunities, we saw that there's a disconnect in the Hollywood community and the advertising community. DC, you may even remember TPP, because we introduced this idea of advertiser-funded primetime network television programming, where the funding was not brand associated. The funding was a business, but the brands did, because Coca-Cola was one of the founding partners. We had 10 founding partners. General Motors, a guy named Chuck Fruit at Coca-Cola.
Oh, Chuck Fruit,
we know
legend,
Chuck.
Icon.
Chuck Fruit.
Rest in peace, Chuck. What year was this about, Jack?
This was 1993 to 96, 97, that we were building this and launching it. So Chuck, Pete Seeley, Phil Garasio at General Motors, John Costello at Sears Roebuck, Paul Mulcahy at Campbell Soup, Coors, Bob Bolte at Clorox, some real brand legends, CMO legends, believed that we had a good idea, and we convinced them to put up $40 million, $4 million each, to invest in primetime network television programming. But we held the back end. So we had deals with Sony, with Columbia TriStar Sony, with Paramount, with Fox, with ABC. We produced a few programs. I was nominated for an Academy Award with Turner Broadcasting for a film called Hank Aaron, Chasing the Dream. And so we produced some stuff. And the business model was that's when back end was available.
Right.
Back end.
Jack, explain to the brand nerds just quickly what back end means. So they
back end means that a network television show, typically the studio paid about 80%. The network covered another 20 to 30%. And in return and then there were different funding partners. The direct, the talent maybe, got residuals. The producers got, and so the studio only retained typically 20 to 80% of the international rights, the syndication rights, the merchandising rights. That was the back end distribution.
That's the back end revenue, brand nerds, that Jack's
back end revenue model. And that's, there was net, there was all kinds of it. So we figured out the economics, we put it together. It took us 3 years to get it together. We got the money up, we got it funded. And when we started succeeding, the agencies conspired with the network sales organizations to kill it, to shut it down. And they started going to, there were some management changes at the brands. They started, number one, they said the back end is dying, international sales are drying up. This is before cable, and syndication is dying. No one's buying any of these old programs. The back end has no, well, Netflix got rid of the back end. They own 100%. They've turned it into a work for hire.
Right.
We had it. We had it. We did it. We put it together. And we could not raise funds because the funding partners, the VCs or the equity partners, and the advertisers fundamentally were convinced it was not a good business model. So we kept the back end. We gave 70-80% of the back end to a pool. We operated on 20 to 30% of our revenues, and that pool would be distributed to help defray the cost of future production that our advertisers would then have the beneficiaries of for their advertising placement. They didn't have to buy in those shows, but they would get a credit back, a capital credit back that would defray their cost of future advertising. The P&G was doing it for years. We really followed the P&G model. You know, they did daytime television. They did, you know, the original Circus of the Stars and, you know, things like that. And Coca-Cola did some of it. Coca-Cola partnered with CAA in Hollywood.
Yep.
To develop programming and content. So that's not a, I mean, again, I can't say it was a fuck up. It was a fuck up that I didn't figure out how to make sure from the business side, not that we didn't have the right model, but that we didn't have the right people to sell it in to the business people at the clients, at the advertisers, at the agencies, and at the networks. And that was my flaw and my fault. And it, you know, look, it's all history. Too late now for the advertisers to step up and fix the mess they're in with, you know, performance-based advertising. Too late for the networks to fix their financial models. And, you know, we see the legacy challenges that exist today. We saw that. David and I really saw it. And the advertisers and people like Chuck Fruit saw it back then too, but couldn't get it done.
Interesting story. Do you have anything to add before we hit the next question?
A quick one. I'm going to connect Chuck Fruit to origin stories. Chuck Fruit is a legend. Rest in power. Chuck Fruit, those who know him know that the way he would run meetings sometimes is he would get folks together in a room. He knew what was going to happen. He'd walk out. The meeting would go on. This is at Coke. And then he'd come back in. And then if the meeting was landed where he wanted it to land, he was all good. If not, he would make sure that it landed. A little origin story. Today we know Clear Channel and we know Live Nation. There was a time where Clear Channel was not only a media company doing radio, mostly radio, but they also owned performance venues. I worked with Chuck Fruit when we were negotiating a deal with Clear Channel, where we were buying radio from them and also for years doing sponsorship inside of these venues where we'd have pouring rights. We had spent hundreds of millions of dollars. Let me say it again, hundreds of millions of dollars, and this is decades ago with Clear Channel. During one of these negotiations, which was contentious, I'm talking to Chuck, and we go, we've agreed on the media side of this. The problem now is on the sponsorship of the venues and pouring rights. And then this happens. You know what? We're not giving them shit for the sponsorship and the pouring rights. We're spending hundreds of millions of dollars over here. You're giving us Clear Channel pouring rights. You're going to gift that to us. That's how Live Nation got started. Because they said, oh, now they did it, but they weren't going to let anyone else do that to them.
No,
so they carved out Live Nation as a separate entity and said, concert venues and pouring rights will be done by this different company, different ticker, different P&L and everything. And that happened through a conversation between Chuck Fruit and I.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I never heard that story. That's a great story. That's a truly origin story, brand nerds, and how that shaped that whole entire business going forward.
Oh yeah.
I got to add to that. You mentioned, Larry, that Tim Spengler and I are launching Lead Human, talk about empathetic leadership. Chuck Fruit personified empathetic leadership.
Oh yeah.
Oh, he did. Yeah, he did.
It's who he was as a human being. He was extraordinary. What a loss to us. Mm-hmm.
You won't find anybody to say anything bad about Chuck Fruit, whoever interacted with him.
No. And if they do, I don't want to deal with them.
That's right.
Yeah, I don't want to deal with them. All right, Larry.
Okay, so this is such a good question for you, Jack. So regarding technology and marketing, we've already identified you're just right at the epicenter of those two areas. Can you tell us where you think marketers should lean in or best leverage tech? Or you can take us to areas you think they should be leery or simply avoid.
They should be leaning into AI. And anyone who's not leaning into generative AI today and where it's headed is making a massive, massive mistake, and it will be their fuck up story in the future.
Yeah, it will
now,
be.
that doesn't mean that we're not going to have a pullback. That doesn't mean there aren't going to be companies that are going to go out of business. You know, people said the internet was dead at one point. People said, when I was at CBS, and they said, if you don't like cable, leave. If you like cable, leave. Cable's not going to be here in 5 years. So we've always been through that with any technological upheaval, but this is the single most dynamic, dramatic transformation since the printing press. When you had the Protestant Reformation and the Creative Revolution and the Renaissance emerge out of it, I believe that this is going to be I'm waiting for the advertising creative renaissance, because with every technological transformation and disruption and upheaval, major one, there's been a commensurate creative explosion. Television creativity, the internet with user-generated video, and that we're seeing today. We are on the cusp of a massive transformation of creativity. And I've wrote a book called Creativity Unleashed. That's a kind of a how-to learn and use AI. It's free at Amazon, Creativity Unleashed. So if you're asking me, I think the question was, should you lean in or lean back or lean out? Or I'd say lean into understanding how generative AI can be a collaborator, a partner, a friend in everything and anything you're doing, from as simple as writing an email that's more effective to building an advertising and marketing campaign.
Jack, applaud you big time. We've had a lot of conversations in the last couple of years about this, and DC and I, in the last year in our consulting side of our business, we use AI like man, and we joke that ChatGPT is our other partner, and it's helped us immeasurably. I am startled by a couple things. So we're with you entirely, like brand nerds, and we've said this: lean in all the way, because if you don't lean in, you're going to get run over, and it's going to happen quickly. Where I live, Jack, in the Bay Area, what's incredibly startling is that in the last 2 years, I love San Francisco. It's my adopted hometown. I'm originally born and bred New Yorker, which I'm proud of being, but San Francisco's my home. I love it. I think it's been disparaged for a lot of reasons I won't get into, and we take the tact here: if you don't like us, fine, because this is the most beautiful place we think there is. But AI is also transforming the business of AI. All those companies are going down in the South of Market area in San Francisco. That's where they all are. They're not in Silicon Valley. They're going in San Francisco. And so I've seen that happen. DC was here not too long ago, and I pointed out to him all these AI billboards by the Bay Bridge. That's
everywhere.
It's all to just say, look at me. It's all to show their VCs like, hey, we're meaningful. It's not really about anything other than that, to just flex some muscles. But that's on the business side. But what you just said is so huge because we're just discovering that. And I thought we lived through the internet era. I thought the internet was what you just said about AI. I thought that the same about the internet. And I never thought we would live through and experience something that was grander than the internet. And I agree with you, Jack. I think it's way bigger and way more transformative than the internet and all the things with mobile and everything. That's how big it is. Totally agree with you.
My next book is called Your Third Brain, Powering a Future of Unimagined Possibilities. It's going to be published in August 2026 by Morgan James. It's about co-intelligence. It's about the combination of human and machine. And it introduces what I call Gen Nexus. Gen Nexus. I don't call them Gen A or Gen B or Gen C. They're after Gen Alpha. They're born 2020 to 2040. They're the first generation to grow up with internet. You know, a parent recently told me that the first word that their child said was not mama or dada, it was Alexa, because it was the word they heard most in their house.
Wow.
And I thought, yes, that's the future there. This is going to be a part of that child's life forever. And it's just going to become more and more integrated into their lives. That's co-intelligence. So I'm really dedicated. Now, you know, it's been a pattern of, you go back to, you know, what I was saying with the Dumont, you know, technology. I've always believed that, looked at, here's the technology. The technology is not going to go away. So how's it going to be used? How's it going to change generations? And I think this is the hugest, most important generational shift, and how we introduce ethics and morality and responsibility and beware of bias in AI is critically important. And I don't think we can leave it up to our generations. And, you know, I don't think we can leave it up to anyone but this next generation to let it evolve, because it's going to be, I hope, and I'm writing a fiction book. I hope that, you know, this next generation, this Gen Nexus, is going to lead us to a better world, and, you know, to solve a lot of the problems and issues that, you know, we talked about earlier. Not to mention environmental issues. I think AI is potentially machine intelligence and machine learning could have enormous impact on the issues that are plaguing our world and plaguing humanity and plaguing civilization. Could also be an additive problem. So that's the interesting thing.
Yes, all great stuff.
Wow.
All amazing. Do you want to hit the next question?
Jack, what are you most proud of, brother?
Proud of the fact that people like you want to have me and introduce me to your audiences. That I'm pretty proud of. I mean, I think that's special. It's meaningful. It's meaningful for you to have said the words that you said, DC, in the opening introduction. That's what I'm proud of. I'm proud, of course, you know, the natural answer is I have my children. You know, I have 3 kids with my wife, another 2 kids. Together we have 5 grandchildren with another on the way. So naturally, they you got to put them at the top of the list.
Yeah.
And but I'd say I'm going to go into the future, and I said I'm writing a fiction. I'm writing a science fiction trilogy.
Do you have a name for it yet?
Hmm?
Do you have a name for it yet?
Eidolon, Eidolon, Eidolon. It's phantom, and it's Greek for phantom, and it's it's 150 years from now, and you could look at Matrix. You can look where the connect the there's no you don't need to go into the internet or onto a computer to go into the virtual world, the metaverse. I hope that Mark Zuckerberg continues to invest in the metaverse because I think ultimately he's going to have a big payback from it. I think he's on to something. I think he sees what the potential is, and the potential is this seamless connection between the virtual and the IRL or real world. And so my science, I'm most proud that I in 2006, I wrote a little pamphlet called Virtual Worlds Rewiring Our Emotional DNA. It was about something called Second Life that's still around. It's a virtual world, Second Life, and it's actually pretty sophisticated virtual world even today. But I wrote about, and at the last chapter of that book was the first chapter of a proposed science fiction book, and I always wanted to expand that first chapter. So I decided I was going to give it a shot. I had some time out in Santa Barbara this summer, and I sat down and I was able to actually develop the outline and write book one. And I realized as I was kind of getting to the end of the book, there's a cliffhanger here. So let me see if so I started book two, and I sent book one off to my publisher. And he said, this is, we want to publish this. So I think I'm most proud of the fact that I think it may be a 4-book trilogy, like Restaurant at the End of the Universe trilogy in 4 books. So I'm proud that I'm doing I've been able to evolve my career to the point where I can do something that I've always wanted to do, and I'm doing it.
It's awesome.
That is fantastic. That's fantastic.
All right, D. Woo, this is deep. I think we ready to hit the next segment?
Let's do it.
All right. DC, Jack, what's popping?
What's popping?
So, Jack, this is our chance to shout down, or simply air something in and around marketing today that we think is good fodder for discussion. And we understand you have something that is flavorful for us. Hit us.
You brought it up right at the beginning. The future of men, Prof G, Scott Galloway. He pisses me off. I don't like the man. I do not like I like what he's doing. I like that he's paying attention to an important problem. But, his framing treats men as a distressed demographic to be activated, to be monetized, and not a generation to be rebuilt. When I wrote The Future of Men, it was that there were solutions that could still change outcomes. We're in the outcome business in marketing, right. DC. Yeah. Scott's focus comes after the collapse, when the pain is obvious and when the anger is monetizable. And I don't like when people monetize anger. And I think a lot of marketing today is political marketing, social marketing is monetizing anger, monetizing problems. And that's commentary. It's not leadership. And so I don't think he's showing leadership. Real solutions require long-term commitment. And exploitation requires a microphone and a monetization funnel. And that's what, that's, I think, what he's doing. I think timing, to your point earlier, DC, saying that, that was 2015, 2016, when I wrote, I think timing reveals intent. So to write what I did, to give the TED Women talk when I did in 2016, I think that uncovers my intent. Yep. I think that Scott is on a bandwagon and monetizing that bandwagon. I think that reveals what his intent is. It's not to fix the problem. It's not to address the problem. It's not to identify the solutions. I really treated men as, to your point earlier, as humans needing dignity, needing purpose, needing direction. And he treats them as an audience optimized for attention, outrage, and scale. And that
Mm,
offends me. It offends me.
mm,
Oh, I love this, D. Oh, I'm
mm.
loving this. Jack,
Uh,
this is awesome. D, you
Shots fired. Shots fired. Go ahead, Larry.
mind if
Go
I
ahead,
chime in? Okay, so
please.
I've read a lot of what Galloway has put forth, and along with been consuming a ton of what you've done, and so I see why you would be angry, and I'm totally with you. You're trying to you were the first one, by the way. Let's make that clear, brand nerds. Jack was way before Scott Galloway was as it relates to this, okay?
Yep.
And he talked about even just seeing the graduation rates, and this is 10 years ago now. So Jack was raising his hand and saying, "Hey, there's an issue." And now here's actions we all need to take. It's in all of our best interests as people, no matter what your gender is, to fix this because, that's the situation. Personally, Jack, I've lived it. And let me give you that background. Our son Jake is 22 years old, in his fifth year of college. So he's right in the bandwidth of this, and he represents a ton of what you've talked about. And I think that what needs to happen is, how do we fix this? How do we, this is a big, huge issue that needs to take action. And Galloway seems like, to your point, he's just trying to almost come at it from a very negative place, where yours is positive, not positive in what's happening, but let's fix this. Let's roll up our sleeves and fix this. And Galloway is seeing it as more of an opportunity to say, hey, this is a problem and let's monetize it. And so that's what I'm seeing in a very distinct difference. And I'm on Team Jack Meyers in a big way.
Well, thank you. Thank you. In terms of fixing it, we're a couple we're like Gen Z and Gen Alpha into this. We're a couple generations into this problem and into this reality. And it's going to start, if we're going to really change things, it needs to start with education, and it needs to start in preschool. It needs to start with how we're educating, the tools we're using to educate, taking the mobile device. I understand taking the mobile device out of the school systems, which is, kind of a big movement today. I have a 14-year-old grandson who spends most of his time in a very sophisticated computer setup. And frankly, I actually think it's appropriate for him. I think it's the right way, and he is, but he should not just be doing Fortnite and Minecraft and
Right.
the gaming. There should be some really focus on how do we use gaming as an educational tool? How do we rethink education? I'm teaching right now at the University of Arizona, and there's a huge registration process for live in person, and I think colleges around the country are experiencing for the first time, while the applications are up, the actual educational curriculum is being challenged, and students are looking for alternatives. We talked about the male female skew, which is growing, not declining. So I think it has to start with how we're looking at education right from the beginning. I mentioned Neil Postman, so I quote Neil Postman, and this quote that I'm going to share with you, he quotes Marshall McLuhan, and Marshall McLuhan quotes Aldous Huxley in Brave New World, and Aldous Huxley quotes H.G. Wells, and it's the same quote, and it's, we're on a path, we're at a pivotal moment, we're on a path, and the road is diverging between destruction and education.
Mm.
That's
And
deep.
that it's been a consistent theme that has run through science fiction. It's run through the educational systems. It's run through most of the philosophical thinkers about how do we solve massive cultural problems. And education is always the answer.
Totally agree. B?
This is juicy. This is juicy.
Thank you.
Friend of mine used to work with at Coca-Cola. His name is Jeff Waterman. He has these sayings, Jack. They're phenomenal, and we call them Waterman-isms. Waterman-isms. One of them was this: anything in life that goes exceptionally well or horrifically poorly. Okay. So, like top of the moon, man, this really, really went well. Or this thing is dead, dead, dead. Why did it even come to be? In terms of an issue, how it gets communicated from one human to another. He said it comes down to three things. He did them in an acrostic called PET, P-E-T. The P is positioning. How does a subject get positioned? When it's talked about, how is it positioned in the marketplace, in the media, in the mind? E is expectations. What is the person that you're talking to in the audience? What are they expecting to get? And the T is timing. He said, if you get all three of these things right, the way you go about an issue, a brand, or whatever, a conversation, it's going to go great. If you fuck up any one of these, you got a problem. For example, you might position the subject of, hey, I really need a new car. And that's the P. And the expectation of the person you're talking to might be, that's good. I was expecting you to ask me for a new car. So you're looking good. Like, I'm going to get a new car. I'm positioning this right. Let's say I'm talking to my parents, and the expectation is, yep, I kind of thought you might have, you're graduating from college. Okay. But if the timing is when I just lost my job, yeah, no, that's not going to work. Yeah, that's not going to work.
Ain't going to work. Nope.
Yeah. Let
Not
me
a good
connect
time.
let me connect this to this issue of men and Prof G. I believe the positioning maybe okay, could be a little off. The expectation to me works for a subset of men who feel like they have been crushed by the world. Mm-hmm. But for the larger population of young men, I don't think they're expecting that. I don't think they're expecting to hear a story of how they are knuckle dragging, emotionally insecure people who don't have a future. I just don't think they're expecting that. And the timing, I think, is off. Yeah. Introducing that in this time, I believe is not good. It's not good, which leads me to my conclusion on this what's popping that you brought up. It's outstanding, Jack, is I believe in therapy. I was doing therapy once, and my therapist said this to me because I'm talking to her about how someone else has done something that I it's like, how could they possibly do that? And she said, when there is a breakdown, there's rarely any one of the parties that is 100% guilty or 100% innocent. Mm-hmm. And Larry and Jack, I'm looking at this therapist like, what? And I paused to just contemplate what she said. And I was like, oh, if there's a breakdown, maybe my first stop is to determine what is my contribution to this break? What can I do? And Jack, what I hear from you are pathways for the young men themselves through education, as well as young women through education, to understand their roles in this thing and what they might do about them. What I hear in the marketplace is just blame and 0% accountability of the young men. Literally zero. That's my response.
And I think, DC, if we focus in on young parents, coaches,
Yep.
mentors,
Yep.
educators who are going to be the ones bringing up this next generation, and the generation that's in grade school right now, in junior school, even in high school, and
Yep.
start really focusing there on making sure that the culture is in place to what you said right at the top, recognize the value of every human being.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Empathy, listening, and creating a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
If we can bring those three qualities, you like to go with threes, I like to go with threes. Empathy, empathetic leadership, listening to people, hearing, not just listening, but hearing, absorbing, bringing to it critical thinking, and creating a sense of belonging where everyone feels they have a place. I think we begin to solve the challenges that we're confronting with masculinity, with the challenges happening in our political polarization and in our ethnic challenges in the world in terms of religion. Let's bring some critical thinking. Let's bring some listening. Let's bring some empathy. And let's just create a world where everyone belongs for those young people who haven't yet been formed. And let's make sure, going back to Larry, your San Francisco colleagues who are in AI, working in AI, and get everyone who's got a job, no matter what it is that's related to building out these platforms at Anthropic, at OpenAI, at Gemini, to ask the question, what are we doing within our organization to make sure that empathy and belonging are, that empathy is just built in, that ethics and morality and biases are being addressed, and I don't think they are.
Awesome stuff, Jack.
Yeah.
Oh man, D, what a great topic that was that Jack gave us there.
Oh, you brought it up at the beginning, but thank you so much. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Boy, it's rare I get to, voice my emotions, which is really powerful. Thank you.
That's key. That's key. All right, Jack, these conversations that we have with folks like you, and they seem like they go in a blink of an eye because they're so wonderful for us. So we're going to segue into our learnings, and DC and I will go, and I'm going to go first. I have a ton, so I'm just going to try and boil these down. So number one, brand nerds, when there's a problem that Jack noticed with men, when you see something like that in a real meta way, don't just identify the problem. Don't just provide commentary, right? Be like Jack and find solutions and be the solution. So that's number one. Number two, like Jack did at CBS, if you see an opportunity like he saw for that sales manager position, be bold and go for it. That's number two. Number three, if you can find a risk-taking culture when you're looking for opportunities, look at that. Look and see, does this company, are they risk averse or are they a risk taker? Because if you're bold and you're a person who want to make things happen, you want to find a culture that will enable you to do what you can do. So look for that when you're looking at a new job. See if it's a risk-taking culture or not. Number four, you want, when you're thinking about a partner in life, a business partner, or whatever, think about what complementary skills they have for you. That's really important, and how you work together in a sort of yin-yang way. Number five, embrace co-intelligence between machine and your brain, and that's what we all, the three of us, espouse. And think about how AI can help you in all ways that you do your work, your life, your play, everything, and lean fully into it. Harness and leverage that AI. Gen Nexus, number six, a new thing. I'm really going to be looking at that, Jack, as you identified. those who were born from 2020 to 2040, and what are the cultural things and the technology that they're going to be born into and how it shapes them. And number 7, like Jack has always done, including right up to this point where he's writing his science fiction story, brand nerds, continue to evolve your career and find that sweet spot between your passion, like what you do well and your passion, and what is happening in culture in the marketplace. And this is the last one, brand nerds, that Jack was just alluding to. It's all about empathy, really hearing what people are saying, having the critical thinking to think about what we need to create a sense of belonging. Everybody wants a sense of community. That is at the heart, I think, Jack, of what you've talked about with some of what's happening with men, in that trying and struggling to find that community outside the technology. That's a big challenge for all of us. So that's something I think we all need to think about as we challenge for ourselves for the future and what we need to do. Those are mine.
Outstanding, Larry.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, outstanding. Brand nerds, at the top of the podcast, I said stop. For those of you all who stopped to listen to this and you're still with us now, I'm guessing you understand why I started with that notion. Jack, at this time in the program, I make a valiant attempt to share with our guest what I believe they are gifting us with in this world that only they can do in the way they do it. I say this, and I'm not just saying this because this has been the theme of the show here. I attempt to describe the human, and the gifts that this human has. I attempt. The process, Jack, varies. Sometimes it happens at the end of the show where something will come to me, sometimes in the middle. But it's never happened the way it's happened here with you, and it happened in the first second. That is because even though I've never met you before, because I've read so much of your material, I kind of felt like I knew you. And then through the time that we've had here together, Larry and I, it's been a fantastic conversation. If this were a book, it already had a front cover and a back cover. The chapters just needed to be written, and you have now written those for me. So let me get into my conclusions. When we asked you the question about your first branding experience, you talked about Dumont. You also talked about Brill Cream, but Dumont. And you described the tube that they make and the network and the daytime TV. They produce TVs. You even mentioned that you've got a poster on the wall, and you kind of motioned, you kind of pointed over, looked over at this poster on the wall. And I thought, Dumont, this is TV. Then you talked about, same question, WKTV, Channel 13, NBC and ABC, the red and blue network. I did not know they were called that. Then RCA came up as a part of that conversation because they owned RCA. RCA also was a record label, and there's a logo. There's a logo, RCA logo. And brand nerds, go look this up. The logo is of this is the original RCA logo, of a phonograph. So think record player, phonograph. And it has this thing coming out of it. It almost looks like a cone, like if you had a traffic cone. It's gold. It's a beautiful thing. This phonograph was called the Talking Machine. The Talking Machine. And there's a dog there. The dog is Nipper. That's the dog's name. Nipper. Now, brand nerds, A dog is who? Man's best friend. So you mentioned these two things. And then let's go back to the first second. I'm looking, Jack, at your background, and I see off your right shoulder, my left shoulder on screen, brand nerds, is a typewriter. And I'm talking an old school typewriter. Is that a Royal Portable by chance?
It's an Underwood. It's an
Underwood. Okay, Underwood. Okay. And I'm looking at this thing, and then I'm going, okay, Dumont TV, classic piece of equipment, old school, all right. Phonograph, which comes from RCA, old school. And then an old school typewriter, Underwood. And this is going through my brain. And then on the fourth question, where we ask, what are you most proud of? One of the things you said, hey, I'm looking to the future now, the future. Now, we'd already talked about the future of men, but then you start to get into this sci-fi book that you're writing, Eidolon. And it's 150 years into the future. And then it all came together for me, brother. At the end, you also talked about, it's rare that I get to voice my emotions. What's the name of the podcast that you're doing with Tim Spangler?
Lead Human.
Lead Human, brand nerds. That's the name of it. So I believe, Jack Meyers, that what you are gifting all of us with, and have done it for years, is this. You are the human bridge between the analog and digital realms. The human bridge between the analog and digital realms.
What do you think, Jack?
First of all, I turned on a recorder because I wanted to hear your words again after you say them, and I want to play it back because I'm blessed. I'm blessed to have this opportunity. As I said, what I'm proudest of, what I'm happiest about is that I'm able to have these conversations. I'm invited into these conversations, and usually it's about giving. You don't necessarily expect to get, the giving is the get back, the opportunity to share. But to be able to hear back that not only kind of the path that the process that how you listened and how you make me feel like I belong in this conversation and that we're the three of us are together in experience, having one experience together. And, we have the advantage of being able to look at each other on Zoom, and it means a lot. I'm blessed. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Well, that's a great mic drop for this conversation. This has been awesome. We've so enjoyed this, Jack. And brand nerds, thanks so much for listening to Brands, Beats, and Bytes. The executive producers of Brands, Beats, and Bytes are Jeff Shirley, Daryl D.C. Cobbin, Larry Taman, Jay Tate, and Tom Dioro. If you do like this podcast, please subscribe and share. And for those on Apple Podcasts, if you are so inclined, we love those excellent reviews. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we look forward to next time, where we will have more insightful and enlightening talk about marketing.